The film itself is rather intense in a smouldering sort of way. Yeah. Is this the kind of thing you said you talked about it between takes and at the end of the day, but are you talking about the work or are you still talking about the characters? I mean, because that's all we have. It is a character piece. It's very much a two-hander.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure that Patricia or myself do anything but intense. I'm not sure as actors. We don't do that. I think that's something that Ruba maybe did consciously, picked fairly intense actors.
Do you like to talk about it though, or just see what happens when the cameras start rolling?
I don't mind talking about it. You know, some directors love to talk for hours and hours about it, and I just listen. And then I go ahead and do what I was going to do anyway, and they either like it or they don't like it. And sometimes they change my mind. I'm happy to talk about it. It's really a question of you just have to adapt to any director's style, and if you happen to sympathise with that director, then it's much easier to do that adaptation. And yeah, it was. I don't really know. It's funny. The whole process of acting is so bizarre that I couldn't tell you what I like and what I don't like. I'm always surprising myself. Every change seems fine to me.
And what of conversations with Patricia, or did you feel the way through the part?
I think probably in retrospect we were probably trying to get to know each other, because the one thing that we didn't have as characters on screen was any knowledge of each other as people. Which we had to, that was the acting, we had to fake the fact that we'd known each other for years and years. So I think we were spending evenings upstairs, curled up on couches on the roof of this hotel, just getting to know each other so that we could actually come up with some real, sort of vague honesty next day. I don't think, because we'd never met each other before. There was no vetting process. We just turned up and started shooting.
Well, I really hope as the film starts to roll out across the US and around the world that this is a film that you'll become known for in time. But maybe. I'd like to finish by talking about what you're perhaps best known for. I mean, I don't know, do you have an idea of what you're best known for?
I think it has to be Star Trek, just in terms of numbers, just the sheer volume of people who have seen this show that's just running on every TV in every country, seemingly all the time, wherever you go. So I'm assuming it's probably Star Trek.
So how did it feel when you finally wrapped 173 episodes of Deep Space Nine?
Such a blessed relief. I was so relieved. I thought, oh my goodness, I can get on with my career now. And it's a totally ungrateful thing to say, but the fact that was the truth of how I felt. I was thinking, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to be able to do something else? This is Italy, so the churches ring all the time. But it's not my cell phone. So I was relieved, happy, excited about the future, and a little bit frightened, perhaps.
Well, at the very least, you no longer had early mornings for makeup and all that sort of thing.
No, this is true. Not on a 9-to-5 basis, but I did have it I was lucky enough to work after Star Trek, so the 5 o'clock mornings still happen.
Well, you've obviously had your fair share of time in the makeup trailer, but what about CGI effects in something so effects-laden like Clash of the Titans, for example? I mean, it can be, career-wise, the exposure is great for you, the paycheck's obviously pretty great, but yeah. I mean, where is the room for the actor in amongst something like that?
There ain't no room for actors in something like that. There's, that's about concepts, and you bring people onto the screen who just look the part, whatever that part may be, and you let them do their stuff, and then you surround all the space around them with effects and coolness and devastation and beautiful armor and scenery, and that's what those movies are about. And sometimes they hit and sometimes they miss. And I think I may be slightly disappointed with the fact that we could rely on the actors and the directors a little bit more to carry a bit more of the weight of those movies. They don't necessarily need quite as much tits and ass as they're getting on screen these days in terms of special effects, CGI, and bells and whistles. The actors can handle it. I mean, you've got Ralph Fiennes and Liam Neeson and people like that in a movie. Let them do their thing, don't bombard them with all this glitz. So, I guess Hollywood make a lot of money out of those movies, so you can't knock it, but that's the way it is.
Well, you've done genre without the glitz. So what do you remember about Doomsday? I know it was a relatively small part, but it was a memorable one.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved Doomsday. I love Neil Marshall. I mean, one of the great unsung directors, and he's one of those people who can make a paper bag look extraordinary, interesting, and give it life, animate it in some way, in camera, as opposed to relying entirely on special effects. He's an old school director. And if you've seen, you know, Descent or Dog Soldiers or one of his other really low budget movies, you'd see what I mean. So I loved working with Neil, and I'd do it again in a drop of a hat.
So I suppose you're looking forward to Centurion on DVD.
I'm looking forward to Centurion. Yeah, on DVD.
And so I think I'll end where we began, because you were talking about how Arabs are typecast in politically charged material. Well, they don't come more politically charged than Syriana. This was the film where I first noticed you, and I suspect a lot of other people as well.
I think people who didn't like Star Trek probably first got to know me from that. And I'm obviously very grateful for that as an actor. It's a tough movie to shoot. You know, lots of egos, lots of interesting people all vying for quite a small amount of space. And I think it was probably the first movie that attempted to explain, Western movie that attempted to explain the political mess we were in, you know, in the early 2000s. And for that, it was a brave piece, and it's still, I think it, you know, it may be a classic, who knows? It may be something worthy in the future in terms of historical context, and it may have done its job in terms of trying to explain what the hell we're all doing to ourselves and how much we rely on these corporations without actually realizing that we're relying on them so heavily. Brave movie. I like it in retrospect. Damn hard to film, but really glad I did.
What was hard about it in terms of the material, or just the environment?
The material was tough, the environment was tough, the part was tough. Gagan, wonderful director, big stars all over the place. How do directors who've never really directed before direct big stars? Generally they don't attempt it, they look for the first person who isn't a big star and start directing them. So I got a hell of a lot of direction. And it was a bit frustrating at times. It ended up as a good movie, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I know it ended up on a lot of lists at the end of the decade when people were looking back, and it ended very, very high.
Yeah.
Across the board,
I'm
critically.
very proud of it for that.
Yeah, you should be. And how do you plan to spend the rest of your time here in Ischia and at the festival?
I've got my 13-year-old boy with me, so it's pretty improvised. Exploring the city, beach, exploring the city, beach, exploring the city, beach. Not many of the movies are appropriate for him to watch, so I don't think I'm going to take him to many of the films.
You have some work in there somewhere, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got to do some work, but, you know, in movies it's never work, you know. It's always meeting interesting people, isn't it, really?